Oh, hi there. I was just watching the 2008 vice presidential debate between Sarah Palin and Joe Biden. I've got that on VR. I don't know who wouldn't enjoy something like that. It's available on Steam for $8.99. Heartily recommend it. It's the vice presidential debate VR experience. It's part of the Sarah Palin collection. Great stuff. But enough about that. It's time to do the drawing for the Patreon review request from my August supporters. And with that, I will, of course, enjoy my monthly beer. Not a beer fan, but I do like this stuff right here. I was introduced to it by Alex C. If you've seen these videos before, you know, that's how you're supposed to do it. Not a mistake. Oh gosh, it's so close. Oh geez, okay, I got a bad feeling about this. Hold on. All right, that part is gross, actually. It needs to settle down. That's the official term for letting the foam decrease. It's called settle down. Wait for the beer settle down before you drink out of it. All right, so this month, the way it works, if you support me for $10 or more, once a month you'll get a message saying, hey, what's something you'd like me to review? And then I will do a video like this, and we will randomly determine one of them. So let's take a look at what we've got this month. Oh, and of course the big deal, and why I'm going to be here for the next 40, 45 minutes, maybe an hour with you guys, is I'm going to give you a counter recommendation based on your request. Whether your request is a actual recommendation or just a request, or maybe you're griefing me. I see at least, actually I'm not sure if any of these are griefings this time, which is totally allowed, by the way. If you'd like to do that, that's fine. But I will accordingly counter recommend something, or counter, I don't know. I don't think I've got any griefing here. Maybe one of them. Well, let's get to it. Okay, Hoarder S, and again, I hope it's okay to use your first name and last initial. We're all friends, right? Hoarder S says he would like a review of Johnny Mnemonic. He calls it, he didn't, maybe he did, I just wrote favorite of all time. Surely he didn't write that of Johnny Mnemonic. At any rate, he calls it the cyberpunk action classic. I've never seen Johnny Mnemonic. However, I do have a newfound appreciation for Keanu Reeves. In his older age, I mean, geez, the dude still looks 30. He's settling into a career of interesting roles. If you see a movie called The Bad Batch, he plays a David Koresh type character. He's got a little, it's not called a cameo, it's a small part as a super bad guy in a movie called Neon Demon. At any rate, I enjoy me some Keanu Reeves. It would be interesting to go back and check out Johnny Mnemonic. My counter recommendation, Hoarder. That's the good part, though. It still needs to settle down a little more. Look at that. You could eat that part out with a spoon. That would be gross, though. Okay, so Johnny Mnemonic, and Hoarder, you mentioned it's an early cyberpunk classic. This comes from a time, and it's based on a William Gibson, is it a short story, I think? This comes from a time where cyberpunk was a forward-looking future vision of what the internet might achieve, right? I don't know how much cyberpunk now is kind of a quaint artifact, given what the internet really has become, and instead of these shared virtual reality spaces, the greater impact of the internet is stuff like social media and the way that opinions can become balkanized into their own little echo chambers. We see things like the 2016 election coming from what the internet has become. So what I'd like to do is jump back and look at one of my favorite views of the internet, which I think is a little closer to what the internet has actually become. As far as, it's a horror movie. It's from 2001. A Japanese director named Kiyoshi Kurosawa. I might have screwed up his first name. No relation to the Akira Kurosawa, who everyone knows. A movie called Pulse, which in Japanese is Kairo, K-A-I-R-O. Is that the syrup? Actually, here it is. Yeah, here's a copy of it right here. I love this horror movie, and you might have seen this and dismissed it as, oh, it's another one of those things with a little girl with long hair and she's a scary demon. It's not that at all. It has some of that technique in it, but it's Kurosawa's nightmarish prediction of what the internet might do. It's kind of an existential dread about the internet. I might be overselling it too intellectually, but I think Pulse is a great movie, and as far as earlier quaint views of what could become of the internet, Pulse is my go-to. Clay H. All right, this is an odd one. Twitch. He says he's curious specifically about me writing about how it might, quote, shift the landscape around conveying info online. Yeah, man. Okay. I have to confess something. I don't know a lot about Twitch. I stream regularly, but only kind of out of a sense of obligation, although I have come to enjoy it. So I'm not sure that I could give you much of an informed opinion about Twitch. Certainly be willing to check it out more. The only streams I watch tend to be people I know, my friends. So, okay, Clay H., that challenge is thrown down. Now, as far as a counter recommendation, gosh, I don't know. I have no idea what to counter recommend to something like that. A cultural trend. Twitch kind of embodies this aspect of the internet and social media that says, because it's something that I'm doing, it's inherently interesting. Look at me. Things I do deserve to be seen by people. So let's see. So my counter recommendation. Do you know about these? Were you aware they existed? They do. They are awesome. That's my counter recommendation. I would have one right now, but I'm not sure they go with beer. They might go with that beer. I'm not going to try. Anyway, seriously, peanut butter Oreos. I didn't know about the existence of these until a week or so ago. Andrew S., who I just met. By the way, if you're ever in Los Angeles, please drop me a line. I would love to buy you lunch. It's the least I could do. Buy you a beer, whatever, for your support. So Andrew S. was one of the folks who he came here. There's two Andrew S's who actually their suggestions are right next to each other. The first one is the Andrew S. I met. He came here, he dropped me an email, we had dinner, he played board games with us. If you're in LA, please let me know. I'd love to meet you. So Andrew S., who I've met, suggests, and let me know if you can see from what he's written, how you can tell that he's from the East Coast, that he's on a city in the East Coast. He suggests Warbits. Warbits. It's an iOS game. And he says, I love his phrasing here, it, quote, grouts little bits of time in between projects or subway stops. The subway stops, that kind of is a dead giveaway. We do have subways in LA, nobody rides them though. I love the way you put that, Andrew. Warbits I've never heard of. I'm assuming it's like what was that iPhone? It was an iPhone game. Uniwar? That can't be right. So these things where you could play it asynchronously with people and you'd take your turn. It also grouted little bits of time between projects. Warbits. Andrew S., here's my counter recommendation. As far as things that grout little bits of time, this unfortunately I'm assuming it's actually not on a mobile platform. I could be wrong. I only know of it from Steam, and it's a word game called Alpha Bear. And it's really cute, and I like word games. It's a kind of a word search, match three, make as long a word as you can, with a little bit of territorial control and building out. Clever little game called Alpha Bear. Unlockable stuff, a scoring system with unlockables that you equip to boost your score. But Alphabets, I really like what they've done. The guy did, I think, a game called Tiny Town. And it's some of the same artwork from that. So there you go, Andrew S., Alpha Bear. Andrew S., another one, the second one. There are actually three of you guys out there, only two this month, I think. The second Andrew S. suggests a movie called Charlotte Sometimes, which I'd never heard of. He calls it a quiet love triangle indie. It's from 2002. And he remembers it from his time, quote, moping and longing after girls, end quote. Andrew S., first of all, I'm glad you're past that. You can waste a lot of time doing that. So Charlotte Sometimes, my counter recommendation, and when you mention moping and longing after girls, this is a little indie, it's not a love triangle movie, it's an indie coming of age movie. There you go, it's a Bildungsroman called Rocket Science. Have you seen this? Rocket Science is, I think, kind of obscure. If any folks who know it probably know it because it's Anna Kendrick's first movie. But I genuinely like it. I like Rocket Science a lot. And I think it's underappreciated, under-recognized. So there's my counter recommendation, Andrew. So Charlotte Sometimes, that was number 4. Number 5, Bruce G recommends Triumph and Tragedy. It's a little awkward because by the time this is posted, there will already be a review of Triumph and Tragedy on Quarter to 3. Oh, written by a fellow named Bruce Garrick. Don't know for sure if it's the same Bruce G here or not, but Bruce G says Triumph and Tragedy. And he also says don't counter-recommend Quartermaster General. I already know that game. Triumph and Tragedy, in case you haven't inferred from what I've said about Quartermaster General, it is a grand strategic World War II board game. So here's my counter recommendation, Bruce G. I actually don't know if you've played this. There's a series of games called Strategic Command. There are at least 4 or 5 of them. The most recent one is called, you ready for this? It's a bunch of generic words. Strategic Command, World War II, War in Europe. Yep. I haven't tried this. I have been meaning to. I like the look of it. I've heard good things about it, but haven't gotten around to trying it. So Bruce G, give that a shot. Let me know if it's any good. You probably already have. Jarmo P, King of Dragon Pass. Okay, Jarmo? Also, when I make these counter recommendations, I'd love to know what you think and if there are things that actually work for you. Sometimes they're kind of only half serious, and I hope that's clear when I make them. But in earnest, Jarmo P mentioned a movie called Sauna, which was a Finnish horror movie, and my counter recommendation to him was something called Black Death. A British fellow named Christopher Smith. He did a movie called Severance, a movie called Triangle. He did Black Death. That was my counter recommendation as a kind of period horror piece, historical horror. Is that a genre? It should be. And Jarmo said to me, and I love getting feedback like this, he said it didn't work for him because it was, quote, too cruel. And that's a very good point, Jarmo. That's a very cruel movie. Christopher Smith's movies, Triangle and Severance, I would say are cruel. So sorry that didn't work for you, Jarmo, but they can't all be winners. So King of Dragon Pass, he suggests, and speaking of can't all be winners, so here's one where this counter recommendation is with reservations. I kind of think this game probably isn't any good. There's a game that is trying to be, I think, like King of Dragon Pass called The Shrouded Isle, which I haven't I've played through a little bit of it and then shut it down and thought, okay, this is something I should maybe come back to and look at a little more closely. However, it might just be shuffling numbers around to no real effect. But it's a Lovecraftian, hey, navigate amongst these different families and their members and try to create a cult on this island, and every now and then you have to sacrifice someone. Sounds cool. But I think it could, well, at any rate, I don't know, I seriously doubt it has the same level of quality as King of Dragon Pass, but it did remind me of that a little with a different motif. King of Dragon Pass being a unique fantasy, Nordic, is it Nordic, Celtic, whatever, world. Shrouded Isle, cultists on an, Lovecraftian cultists on an island that's shrouded. I don't know. I kind of doubt it's any good, but Jarmo P, if you find out, let me know. Number 7, Sandu B, much more well, last month Sandu B suggested karaoke, which I would have done. He suggests Dawn of Wonder, and he suggests it so adamantly. Check this out. Not that sip of beer. That's not what I wanted you to check out. This is his request, and he sent it to me. Now, here's the deal. This is a fantasy book. Let's see, did he say anything about it? No, he didn't, and I appreciate that. Hey, I think you should look at this. I don't want to say anything. What would you think? I'm okay with that. Here's the deal about this book, Dawn of Wonder. See how huge that is? It is 709 pages. It's also only book 1 in The Awakening. Oh dear, and I love this. The early part. So you look through it and you're like, oh, all that text. Check this out. It's got pictures. There's a list of the illustrations. There's also the author, Jonathan Renshaw. There's an admonishment from him that says about these pictures, spoiler alert, this table is intended as a reference, not a door for sneak previews. So I like that. You're not supposed to look at these before you read. There is, however, there's a pronunciation guide. Look at this. A map. Yeah? Okay, so Sandu, he apparently is quite fond of these. He suggests the first volume. My counter recommendation, because this is totally out of my wheelhouse, I don't know a lot of fantasy, is I hear the words Dawn of Wonder and I think Age of Wonder. Sandu, you've probably played this. Age of Wonder 3 with all the DLC. I've even used it as a counter recommendation before, so this is kind of bunting. I apologize. But Age of Wonder 3, one of the definitive 4X strategy games. The definitive fantasy one, I think I would say. All right, Sandu, so number 7, Dawn of Wonder, a huge honkin' book. Speaking of sending me copies of things that they suggest, Joseph M. says, again, consider Phlebas, which he has sent to me. And there it is in that stack there, which is off camera. You can't see it. Joseph said, too, he mentioned that he was on the outer edge of Harvey when he sent this in, Hurricane Harvey. And we've got Irma incoming as I'm recording this. I think this is the September 6th as I record this. So Joseph M., I presume you're on the outer edge. I presume you stayed dry enough, right? But him mentioning that made me think of a book in which a hurricane figures prominently. Now, there is a writer named Charles Portis who I love. I adore this fella. And he's known for True Grit. He's got a book called Norwood. I think that one's fairly well known. This, however, would be my favorite. Dog of the South. It's my first Charles Portis. It is, some folks might consider it minor Portis, but I love this. And a hurricane figures prominently into what happens in the book. But I love the protagonist. So it opens with the protagonist's wife has left him, and he is going to find her to find out what the deal was. And one of the self-justifications he used for wanting to find her is when she left, the car that she took had in it a tape of his favorite professor's Civil War lecture on it. And he wants his tape back. And it's not like a revenge thing. He's not hunting her down. It's much more pathetic than that. So Dog of the South I like a lot. And it occurs to me, this idea of your favorite professor's Civil War lecture being on a cassette tape, how antiquated is that? Nowadays, it would be a podcast, right? It'd be like a Dan Carlin hardcore history podcast or something. And you could just download that again if your wife leaves with it. So there you go, Joseph M. I think you would appreciate that. I think most of you guys would appreciate that. Dog of the South or any Charles Portis. Great stuff. John R. says Prey, the one that just came out. Here's why I love knowing nothing about games. The opening of Prey. I had no idea what kind of game it was. I mean, I think I knew it was an open world game. It was the folks at Arcane who did the Dishonored games, so I had a sense for what it was. But the opening of Prey is freaking brilliant if nobody spoiled it for you. So I got through that. I played a little bit into it. I stalled for some reason, but I'd love to go back and try the rest of Prey. John R. says of it, it has lots of system, tons of freedom, and a, quote, better than expected story. So, yeah, that makes me want to try Prey, John R. Or not try, finish, see through to completion. Here's my counter recommendation, John R., and I would be surprised if you haven't played this. Speaking of lots of systems, open world freedom, and a better than expected story, you have played Just Cause 2, right? Tell me you have. All of you guys have played that. So there you go, I like Just Cause 2 a lot. Just Cause 3, huge tactical error in the way they made that game, but Just Cause 2, still great stuff. Chris M, and I love that Chris M does this. I think he's recommending stuff that he knows I would enjoy. So Chris, bless your heart. Electra Assassin, he mentions again, which I do enjoy, and I love Electra Assassin is so cool. They just released in Marvel Heroes Omega, which is their consoleization of Marvel Heroes Online. They just released Electra as a playable character. Cool, I thought. I've got a bunch of Eternity Splinters. I'll go spend them. It's something you can only buy on the stupid PlayStation Store. It's like a bundle exclusive thing. Why Electra? Is it the Defenders thing that's on... Anyway, so I can't buy Electra with my Eternity Splinters. How dopey is that? Speaking of dopey, I spent an embarrassing amount of time last night getting Spider-Man from level 20 to level 30. I'm going to edit that part out. You guys don't need to know that. All right, so my counter recommendation, Chris M, because I think you're recommending to me things that you think I would like, things that you know I like, that I would enjoy writing about. And I'm really, the Fight Club review, which won, that's incoming. So I'll bite my tongue for now. Chris M., here's something that I think you would like. It's not, let me preface this by saying it's not a very good, it's an uneven movie, right? I think where it goes is a little bit facile, predictable, but it's a fascinating movie for the two lead actresses in it. And parts of it remind me, and don't take this too much to heart, but parts of it remind me, Chris M., of a movie I know you love called The Handmaiden. So this is a movie called Bear, not B-E-A-R, not the kind of bear that's a threat to you in the woods, B-A-R-E. And it stars two actresses, one of whom I didn't previously care for, one of whom I'd never heard of. An actress named Diane Agron. I think she's from Glee, TV show I've never seen. She's the lead in it, and she's really good. But there's a fascinating performance in it from a woman named Paz de la Huerta, who I've seen previously and she didn't register much for me. She's a beautiful young lady. She is known for, I forget what the movie is, a role that involves like a lot of nudity and sexuality. But in Bear, she's really brave, and it's an arresting performance, and their relationship is fascinating. So there's my recommendation for you, Chris M., because I think you particularly would enjoy certain parts of Bear. There you go. Remember, B-A-R-E, not the big fuzzy thing. Sam S., bring me the head of Alfredo Garcia. And that's one of Sam Peckinpah's later movies. I do not know it. I feel like I probably should. By the way, when I was writing this down, I thought this movie was called Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Gonzalez, but it is Garcia. I did verify that. All right, Sam S., late Peckinpah. I'm down with that. Really, the only Peckinpah I know is, I guess, Straw Dogs. I'm sure I've seen Wild Bunch, but couldn't tell you the first thing about it. So, okay, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. Here's my counter recommendation for you. Sam S., this actually was recommended on the Patreon review request a couple of months ago by someone named Andrew K. I watched it, and it's also uneven, but fascinating. This is a German Western, a Western set in Germany called Dark Valley, with an actor named Sam Riley, who I don't normally care for, but I really liked Sam Riley in Dark Valley. And I really liked the unique angle that Dark Valley had as far as being a German Western. It's set in Germany in the the 19th century, the 1800s or something going on. And it never would have occurred to me that there were frontier areas in Europe, in Germany, in the middle of the 19th century. I mean, isn't everything built up into towns at that point? But it seems like it takes place in a logging settlement up in the woods. So for its setting, for Sam Riley's performance, what unfolds is kind of predictable, but still pretty cool. Dark Valley is my counter recommendation. Number 12, Matt B. Again, Battle Brothers. Matt B., you can request this as many times as you like. I have no problem with repeat requests. These will eventually come up. You request them enough times, the odds are, the math, it's incontrovertible math, it will eventually win, right? So Battle Brothers, thank you, Matt B. Here's my counter recommendation. I think currently the definitive tactical combat RPG, War of the Chosen, the DLC for XCOM 2, is so darn good. So I think that's my tactical combat game of choice these days. And that's my counter recommendation. Matt B., surely you've played War of the Chosen for XCOM 2, right? Lucas N., Andromeda Strain, the book, the Michael Crichton book. All right, Lucas N., I remember reading that as a kid, and I rewatched the movie recently. I say recently, within the last 5 years. The movie is really good, and it's so 70s. Is it Ray Wise? I forget who directed it. But the Andromeda Strain movie holds up, and it's also very much a relic of 70s cinema in that all the actors in it, all the people playing scientists in the Andromeda Strain movie, look like scientists. And as far as I know, none of them are famous actors. I'm sure people from the time might have known them. I don't recognize them from other stuff. They're just guys I've never seen before, and they look like they'd work in a lab, and it's awesome. So I love the Andromeda Strain movie. I guess, Lucas, if you're recommending the book, you've seen the original movie, but that's my counter recommendation if you haven't. If you have, watch it again. And another funny thing about the movie, Andromeda Strain was recently remade as a TV miniseries. And rather than casting people who look like scientists, the cast includes, and I don't think any of these folks look like scientists, no offense to scientists, Benjamin Bratt, Viola Davis, and Eric McCormick. People are way too pretty to be scientists. They look like actors, not scientists. So, not the TV miniseries Andromeda Strain, Lucas, the original movie from 1971, I think. All right, Colton W, number 14. Okay, here, Colton W, what are you doing? He says, review crickets as a source of protein. Crickets, bugs that you eat. I didn't believe this was, well, so I did Google this. There are places here in Los Angeles you can go that serve crickets in various forms. There's like cricket flour, cricket chips, cricket bars. I'm making myself nauseated. This is a real thing. And apparently crickets, pound for pound, have twice as much protein as beef. So think about that. It doesn't make me want to eat crickets. So fortunately, Colton W gave me an out, and he said, if you can't find a place that sells crickets, or I'm assuming this was his subtext, if it's too nauseating for you to consider, here's your out, review Atom Fishing 2. I didn't know this. Atom Fishing 2, it is in a post-apocalypse fishing game. How cool is that? So I should check that out anyway. Now here's the deal, Colton W. Fishing is a fixture as a mini game in a lot of MMOs, and it has been for a while. Any game that has crafting, that has bodies of water, hey, there's probably going to be fishing, right? We're kind of jaded to that nowadays, but I remember where I first encountered fishing as a gameplay mechanic and loved it and was fascinated by it. And it's in a game that I would have set up. You could never go back to that. It's only on, I think, the PS2. Yeah, it was on the PS2. Who's going to leave their PS2 plugged in? It's lost to time and obsolete technology, right? But guess what? This game is not. The first game where I really got into fishing, Dark Cloud 2. It's now downloadable, a remastered version for the PS4. So Colton W, try that. And I will, Colton W, if we roll a 14, I will probably be opting for an Atom Fishing 2 review. Alex C, speaking of which, he's the fellow that sent me this glass, cheers, suggests a book called Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. Now, I'd never heard of this. I didn't know what this was. Alex did say it's a fascinating universe with its own magic system. Okay, Alex C. Again, this is a movie I'm recommending with caveats, but what I like about this movie is it has its own magic system. It presents magic not as something that's just a bunch of CG and hand waving and Doctor Strange kind of patterns, and it presents magic as something that is painful, that's exhausting, that takes a long time, that really takes a lot out of you. Now you might be thinking there's a movie that just came out called A Dark Song that does this. A Dark Song is pretty good. You should check that out. But the one I'm thinking of has as opposing magicians an actor I really like named James Nesbitt and an actress I really like who you guys probably know, you watch Game of Thrones, called Kate Dickie. And they play an opposing witch and warlock or whatever, and there's a great magic battle between the two of them. The movie's Outcast, and it's directed by Colm McCarthy, who recently did a really cool movie called Girl with All the Gifts. He is currently doing a show for Sci-Fi called Krypton, about Superman's home planet. So anyway, Outcast has Kate Dickie and James Nesbitt doing, sorcerer battles are normally guys going like this, and looking really intent, and CG comes out of their fingers, and they look silly. This is a non-silly, really cool sorcerer battle. So, speaking of unique magic systems, Alex C., Outcast. And not, by the way, Outcast, I think there's a movie called Outcast, there's a TV show, not that one. This is the 2010-ish movie with Kate Dickie and James Nesbitt. Soren H., Yakuza 0. I'm so confused about the Yakuzas. Are you supposed to start with Yakuza 0? Isn't Yakuza 0 like a prequel that you play after Yakuza 1? I've lost track of the Yakuzas, and to be perfectly honest with you guys, I have assumed for the longest time that Yakuza is just Shenmue. Am I close? I mean, I know that the guy who does the Yakuza games, he worked on Shenmue. That might be a little unfair on my part. Soren H. mentions Yakuza 0 specifically because of the disco dancing mini game. And I like the sound of that, Soren H. I'm not being facetious. I do like the sound of that. Here you go, Soren H. Have you played Crypt of the Necrodancer? It's too much for me. It's really hard. I love dancing mini games. I love rhythm games. Crypt of the Necrodancer, it's a musical dancing roguelike. Yep, it's a super cool idea, and I can't make any headway with it. It's a little bit much for me, but there's my counter recommendation, Soren. Jeff S. And I think he might also be doing a little bit of what Chris is doing, where he's like, I know you like this. Get into it more and tell us about it. Jimmy Corrigan, World's Smartest Kid. All right, Jeff S. And I was reading it, and the copy's in the other room. What I didn't remember about Jimmy Corrigan, World's Smartest Kid, is how incredibly bleak it is. And I don't know if it digs itself out of that, but it's well, at any rate, yeah, I'd love to write about it, but it reminded me of, it made me think, Jeff S. So Garfield, Jim Davis's Garfield, is inconsequential, right? It's just a silly cartoon. Nobody thinks Garfield is funny once you're over the age of, 12? And then maybe when you get to senescence, you get to be 70, and then maybe you think Garfield's funny again. I don't know. There's a guy who took the Garfield comic strips and just removed the last thought bubble. And it created this whole new sense of comedy about Garfield, where it was like comic timing instead of a stupid punchline. Let me, however, refer you to actual Garfield cartoons as written by Jim Davis, starting in October 23rd, 1989. Now, all the Garfields are online. If you just Google Garfield, I think you'll come to the archive of them. Better yet, if you just Google Garfield, October 23rd, 1989, it should take you right to that one. It is that week's Garfield series. It starts on a Monday, goes through to Friday, so it's 5 strips. 24, 5, 6, 7, 8. It might be more, it might be 7. Yeah, I think it is 7 of them. At any rate, it's that week of Garfield, and it's actual stuff. It's real stuff that Jim Davis wrote and published. If you read Garfield every day, this is what appeared in the newspaper. You guys remember those? On October 23rd of 1989. It's kind of stunning, and I seriously like that week of Garfield. I think that week of Garfield is kind of amazing. And if you know it, you probably know what I'm talking about. If you don't know it, go look at that right now. All right, it's not for everyone, by the way. Don't, like, share it with your kids if they love Garfield. It's not for them. All right, thank you, Jeff S., for that. Jimmy Corrigan is amazing stuff. Chris H. says, so he mentioned this, and he then says, by way of an explanation for why he picked it, he says, if push comes to shove, I think I would pick this as my favorite movie. No, okay, so I was thinking Hoarder S. calling Johnny Mnemonic his favorite movie of all time. Maybe I was confusing that with what Chris wrote about Days of Heaven. But no, I wrote that Hoarder S. said that about Johnny Mnemonic. That can't be true, Hoarder. Johnny Mnemonic is nobody's favorite movie of all time. I must have miscopied it. Like, favorite cyberpunk movie? Favorite Keanu Reeves movie? So anyway, Chris S. says Days of Heaven. It's early first Terrence Malick movie, and that's what he requests. Now, I thought of this. If push comes to shove for me, and I had to pick a favorite movie, I wouldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I don't think of movies that way. Different movies appeal to different parts of me, and I like different movies for different reasons and in different moods and for different elements. But if push came to really hard shove, and I had to pick one, and Chris H., I'm sure you've seen this, just like I've seen Days of Heaven, as I'm sure you know. You're just curious to have me write about it, so appreciate that pick. If push came to super hard shove and I was forced to pick a favorite movie, and I would offer it with all kinds of caveats for what favorite means, what I would say is it means the movie that I most resonate with, that is most personal to me, that creates for me, it's like an experience every time I watch it. And I can watch it over and over again. And it has incredible meaning for me that I wouldn't expect it would have for everyone. Darren Aronofsky's The Fountain. I know, does that sound pretentious to do that? But if push came to shove, that's the one I would have to pick. So there you go. All right, thank you, Chris H. Days of Heaven, number 18. Number 19, okay, this is the one that I got stuck on for so long. This video would have been up 2 days earlier if I didn't get stuck with this. Matthew C. says for number 19, Kentucky Route Zero, which is an adventure game. I didn't know this, but it's not even done. Like, only the first 4 episodes of Kentucky Route Zero are available. He says he compares it to theater, and he compares it to Oxenfree, a game that he knows that I like. I don't know anything about Kentucky Route Zero. I know I've heard of it. I'm assuming because of the comparison to Oxenfree, it's just an adventure game. Okay, Matthew C. Now, I don't know this genre really well, and I don't know that I could, I don't know what I would recommend. I haven't played a lot of adventure games, but, oh, and he says it's a magical realist adventure game. That's why I think it's an adventure game, he told me. All right, so I was thinking of adventure games, and then I started thinking of movies from Kentucky. I don't know if Kentucky Route Zero even has anything to do with Kentucky. By the way, a certain spineless senator has ruined Kentucky for me. Whenever I hear Kentucky, I think of that dude. Rather than thinking of something from Kentucky, I actually watched a couple of crappy horror movies that were made in Kentucky. Can't recommend any of them. I just finally thought, okay, what's the last adventure game I played that I kind of liked? Abduction from, is it Rand Miller? Which is kind of a modern version of Myst, and not an updating of Myst. It's a whole new game. But Abduction, spelled with an O, I really liked. But you know what happened to Abduction? I was playing through Abduction and I refused to look up any puzzles. I figured I'm just going to experience this, and if I get stuck, I get stuck, and I'll end it there. But I didn't get stuck. Some of the parts were very difficult. I enjoyed some amazing, just super gratifying aha moments. So Abduction I really liked, but here is what happened with Abduction. I got stuck, and I got to a part involving manipulating a grid with like a liquid in it. You connect it, and you're stuck. You're at a dead end where a bridge, you have to get across, and until you can figure out some kind of code with this grid, it's a bit like Witness, right? You can't make any progress. And I got stuck, and I didn't know what to do, and I went back, and I looked all over the place, and there'd been earlier instances of this kind of puzzle, and it just sort of brute forced through them. I tried to figure out what the code was on this, and I couldn't figure it out, and I was stuck. And I even went so far as to looking up hints online, like help, and I was still stuck, and I couldn't figure it out. And I finally looked up the answer, and I still didn't understand how I was supposed to figure that out. And then I entered it in there, and I crossed the bridge and kept playing. But at that point, the game was no longer mine. Like, where I was no longer a product of things that I had figured out. This was no longer my playthrough. This was now partly the playthrough of whoever posted that solution online. And it just, it lost some of the magic. Yeah, that's the word I'll use, because that's what an adventure game or a puzzle game should do, is it presents you with a conundrum simply because it's really gratifying when you figure out that conundrum. And if I couldn't figure it out and it was just given to me, what's the point? So fortunately, it was really far into Abduction. I've seen a lot of the game. I love what it does. I love the graphics in it, the imaginative world, possibly plural, world. So I recommend Abduction. I have no idea if it has anything to do with Kentucky Route Zero. If they're like, is Kentucky Route Zero one of those visual novel adventure games? Does it have puzzles? I don't know. But Matthew J., there's my counter recommendation. All right, 21. Eric G., he apologizes for not coming up with something new. And again, just like with Matt's Battle Brothers recommendation or selection, you don't have to come up with something new. I'm happy to see these things come through over and over again, because guess what? They make me all the more curious about that game. So, Eric G., this is actually on the way, Amazon.com. It should be here tomorrow. I ordered it yesterday. Seven Wonders Duel. So I'm finally going to finally take a look at it. If we roll a 21, I'll, of course, be writing it up at some point. Here's my counter recommendation. Oh, shoot a monkey. I didn't bring the box in. Dadgummit, I was going to show you the little box. This isn't necessarily a two-player game. It can be. It works just fine. Eric G., I know you're getting married. You're looking for things you can play with your wife. I think you guys might enjoy Flip City. Flip City is a really clever, really muscular deck builder based on city building, and it's called Flip City because the whole conceit is you play with a deck of cards where the top of the card is always consistent. There are no card backs because on the other side of the card is an upgraded version of that card. And so the deck that you maintain, whether a card is this side up or this side up, there's a lot of gameplay involved there. There's a sense of getting an economy going. And the base set, it's just 4 or 5 cards, each with 2 sides, so it's just 10 pieces. Super elegant. There are a couple of add-ons for it, both of which I like. One of them actually isn't an add-on, it's a whole reworking of the gameplay mechanics in a rural setting, but it's still called Flip City, oddly enough. So just the base set is fine, but I recommend that, Eric, I think you and the missus would enjoy Flip City. Anyone would enjoy Flip City. It goes up to 5, I think just 4 players. Sam H. All right, Sam H. Nighty Night. Never heard of this. It's apparent, I didn't write this down, but I thought he said it was British. He says it's about a suburban, narcissistic sociopath. Okay, and I think he might have said it's a comedy. I don't remember. Sam H., color me intrigued. So I heard, not necessarily narcissistic, but suburban sociopath, not necessarily suburban. I guess this guy's actually urban. It is British. It's a black comedy. It put me in mind of a movie about a sociopath, but that it's a darkly comedic movie about this guy. Here's the problem. The movie that I was thinking of was someone's name. Now, if you're going to make a movie, I have a quick tip for you, and you insist on naming the movie after your main character, okay, fine, fair enough. But please, 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 give your main character a distinctive name. You know, like Napoleon Dynamite, like Barton Fink, John Wick. It's the other one I wrote down. I will remember those. I remember those guys. Just don't tell me just the first name, especially if it's generic. Like at least Hannah, I have to think, is it the Hannah with the H at the end or without the H? It's without the H. I remember that one, plus that movie was great. So for the life of me, this movie was called David. I thought it was called David. It was something like David. I was pretty sure it was David. I went through IMDb looking at all the Davids, and there's a bunch of movies called David. A lot of them about the early king of Israel. And I'm going through and I'm looking and I can't find the one about the British psychopath. It's called David, I can't. And then I was thinking, well, maybe it's not called David. Maybe because the guy didn't give the full name of the character and it wasn't memorable. Maybe it's a different name. So, internet, thank you so much. You're awesome. I typed into Google, what did I actually write? I forgot what I write, but it was basically like, what's the movie about the British sociopath and it's a dark comedy? Like I did something like that. And the first hit, actually it might have been a few hits down, but it was on that first page. I didn't even have to scroll the screen down, the top of the first page. Tony. It's called Tony. That's the name of the movie, Tony. David. So Tony, I really like the guy playing Tony. I meant to look up his name. It's just a really dark comedy. It's kind of slow, but I thought it was unforgettable. So I don't know if it has a similar tone, Sam, to what you're describing in Nighty Night. But I recommend Tony. If you can handle slow indie movies, and if you can handle dark comedy, the guy in Tony is fantastic. There's my recommendation for you, Tony. All right, and then finally, number 23, Tony T. I didn't even make that one. Not the Tony in the movie, as far as I know. Tony T. Eldritch Horror with the Mountains of Madness add-on. Now, Tony T., I think I have reviewed that already. I've written up Eldritch Horror, and I think by the time Mountains of Madness came around, I was a little bit put out with what Final Fantasy was doing with their game. Because Final Fantasy, they make a cool game, and then they kill it by making it a business model, by selling add-on crap with no regard for what it does for the basic design. And that's what's happened with Eldritch Horror. Eldritch Horror is currently buried under a mound of cruft. And I own most of it. I put my foot down in the last one that had a separate board. It was a Dreams, which one? It was a, I forget which one it was. It was basically one of the Dreamlands bits of Lovecraft, which I never cared for anyway. So I didn't get that. I've got all the other bits and pieces of Eldritch Horror. And I'm pretty sure when Mountains of Madness came out, I did write it up. Now, here's the deal. If I've already reviewed something, feel free to request it again. I'm happy to revisit things I've previously reviewed. So here's the deal, Tony T. If we roll a 23, I'll just write up or make a video of a playthrough or something with Mountains of Madness. So there you go. Oh, and my counter recommendation, this has actually been nominated or before for these review requests. It's been requested. The Arkham Horror Living card game. I actually think so the Arkham Horror Living card game, the basic mechanics of it are nothing unique or new. They've Final Fantasy has done this basic model of cards. You know, you deal out a card and it fights one of your character cards, and they've done this with Warhammer. I think their Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings games use the same basic model. The Arkham Horror game uses the same basic model. And it's also buried under lots and lots of post-release episodic stuff. It's a deck builder, right? But what I like about it is it has that persistent deck building across multiple adventures. And even though I think the gameplay is nothing special, I just love that persistent deck building idea, like the Pathfinder card games, right? So I'm going to go ahead and counter recommend because it's easier, by the way, to set up. Eldritch Horror, huge bear to set up. I mean, and to organize, to keep all that stuff in a box. There's my counter recommendation. So I'm going to go on record as liking Arkham Horror, the living card game. All right, so there are 23 picks for this month. Let's now roll on randomresult.com a random number. Are there other beers that good? There can't be. All right, between number 1 and 23, and you guys will see this before I do. All right, we are picking, oh shoot. All right, well, this doesn't count. I accidentally, in hitting tapping, it seems like it told me to roll. This doesn't count. Well, I won't even show you. I rolled a 7, but it doesn't count. It doesn't count. That's not the, because when I do it up here that it counts. All right, so I'm just gonna go to, this is draw again. All right, you guys see this? Let me see if I can get my finger positioned correctly. All right, go. It didn't take, did it? Oh, 14. Right? What is that? 14. I don't know. Oops, on the back page. Uh-oh. Oh my God. It's Adam Fishing 2. It's not the crickets. It's not eating crickets. Adam Fishing 2. Congratulations, Colton W., for your review request winning this month. Adam Fishing 2, right? The crickets was just a joke. You don't expect me to eat crickets, do you? I think Adam Fishing 2, I remember looking this up and thinking, a post-apocalypse fishing game, cool, but then seeing that it was an MMO. Huh. So, do you guys have an Adam Fishing 2 guild that I can join? Maybe you can help me level up my character. There you go. That's the winner of this month's Request Wednesday. So, as usual, thank you guys so much for supporting me. I know I've got a backlog of these reviews. One thing I can promise you, it may not be timely, but eventually all this stuff will get written up. I promise. I promise this will eventually happen. Terrible at deadlines, but it will get done. So, Adam Fishing 2, sooner or later there will be a review of it. Because again, the eating crickets was just a joke, right, Colton? That didn't count. That wasn't real. So there you go. Thank you guys so much. We'll do this again in a month. Hope everyone is having a good fall. Enjoy your September, and I'll talk to you guys at the end of the month. Cheers.